Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is a gathering of representatives to other organizations, and I'm Zachary Dutton. I serve Philadelphia Yearly Meeting as Associate Secretary for Program and Religious Life. And we are recording this meeting because not all of our representatives are able to attend, so we want to make sure that they get to watch at least some of the highlights of what goes down at this meeting later. So the first thing that I'd love to invite is for introductions to take place. So if people can, I'd love for you to write in the chat your name and what organization you represent, PYM2. And let me know if that's a foreign concept to you, or if putting in the chat is not something you want to do. Awesome. So we have people from Friends General Conference, Friends Fiduciary, I am going to share my screen briefly and show you a list of some of the organizations we have representatives to. Can you see it? I hope it's around the right screen. So we appoint people to American Friends Service Committee, the Friends Committee on National Legislation, Friends Fiduciary, Friends General Conference, Friends Peace Team, Friends Law Committee for Consultation, and Councils of Churches. I don't think the list on the website is complete. And I also think that we're just
And it's pretty far out of date. Like there are people on the list who are deceased by several years.
So I think that is a great indication of work that we still have to do. And this is the first meeting of its kind to really try and come together as a community of reps to other organizations, and sort of say, hey, look, we're all in different capacities, bringing the energy of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting Quakers to our organizations that we also either serve on the boards of or attend to that organization in some other way. So yeah, and I think there are a couple of challenges. One is that I think up to this point, representatives to other organizations have sort of existed off in silos from each other, and are maybe often sometimes even identifying more with the organization they represent PYM to than maybe PYM. So that's been a challenge. Another is having accurate records and data. For some reason, that seems to have just continued to be a struggle for us of like just actually knowing who's representing us, which is so interesting to me. My hope for this meeting, this gathering, is that we could just put ourselves on a path in a particular direction towards understanding better what it means to rep for PYM and to note together what some of the challenges are as well. So really quickly, I'm sure we all know this, but I just wanted to review, because on the one hand, I think the nominating council of PYM is the body that recommends appointments for representatives to other organizations. And so I think that that's something we maybe all realize is a thing in PYM's governance structure. The other thing that is more still in formation and part of the work is that once representatives to other organizations exist, how they fit in the governance structure is actually in PYM under the care of the Quaker Life Council. And the Quaker Life Council has a committee called the Program Committee, whose job it is to provide care and attention to PYM representatives to other organizations. And I bet you all the money in my pockets that none of you have actually heard from the Program Committee in any substantive way to date, checking in on how things are going. And that's simply because I think the Program Committee is still getting its feet sturdily on the ground in terms of all of the work before it. But I think in the coming year, you can expect to start to hear more regularly from that particular group of people in the yearly meeting. And to Robin's concern about data being inaccurate, that will be the committee that information like that can be channeled through, so that you can have a real clear connection to the governance structure of PYM, which I think goes a long way to starting to break down this sense of being just sort of out in the wilderness, which you may or may not experience. And I think as part of that, and part of what I hope that we can spend most of our time today talking about, there are questions about what sorts of expectations do we want to have for representatives of PYM, and how do those expectations fit in with the work that you're already doing as reps. And I just wanted to mention one other thing, which is that there are administrative processes in place for supporting Philadelphia Yearly Meeting representatives, especially regarding funding. So if you or your fellow representatives require support to travel to a governance meeting or some other event in your capacity as a representative, then there are funds to help support you in doing that if you don't have them yourself. And the person to reach out to is Olivia Brangen, who is our community engagement coordinator, and she's also the primary staff support to, you guessed it, the program committee. And I'm putting her email address in the chat so that if you have any further questions, you can always reach out to her, especially regarding financial support. Okay, so that was just a real brief presentation. And so now I'm curious if there are questions that people have. And I see that Bill has a raised hand. Bill, would you like to ask your question?
Well, Zach, before you asked us to ask questions, I just had a comment. I'm a rep to the FCNL General Committee, and our other link back into PYM is we have established a collaborative called the Legislative Policy Collaborative, and all of the members of who are reps to FCNL are sort of by default members of that Legislative Policy Collaborative. And that has provided, in my, I guess now, 3 years serving as a rep, that Legislative Policy Collaborative has been a really strong link back into PYM. We hold a couple of meetings each year. We often try to sponsor workshops in which we invite other members of the Quaker community within PYM to those workshops. And that's been a strong link back from FCNL back to our organization, our PYM organization, and the meetings that make it up. Just offering that as another linkage in addition to the program committee.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, there's lots of ways to get to be engaged on the PYM as a representative. And we'll note that collaboratives, like representatives to other organizations, are also under the care of QLC and its program committee. So there's lots of generative synergy that's possible there. Were there any other questions about anything that I've shared so far? Yeah, Robin.
I have a question about the responsibility of the nominations council to report to the website manager about who has been named and approved as a representative of the yearly meeting. Is that an appropriate structure, or would that be a more functional structure than waiting for it to go through the program committee?
Yeah, the process is that the nominating council presents a report at every session suggesting names to be appointed as representatives to other organizations. And then the data, our wonderful data staff take the names that have been approved and add them to the website and also into our database. So that's the process that currently exists.
But it's not connecting to the website.
I think, Robin, you're noticing inaccuracies on the website. And so you and I connect offline and figure out how it is that the process I just outlined isn't working for FWCC in the way that it should, but the process I just outlined is the process that we use. So it seems to not be working, and so that's great. And I think that that's part of the reason why we are meeting here today. I'll zap you an email after this meeting concludes. Carter, did you have a question?
Yes. My question has to do with my role with the Pennsylvania Council of Churches. I can't remember when the last time I was appointed to that, when I was appointed to that was. It has been quite some time. I believe it's well overdue. And it's interesting that what the Council of Churches expects and what we do are two greatly different things. And it always has been, because we are Philadelphia Yearly Meeting. And our people, and our representative to their board and to other activities are either done by invitation or by the nominating committee. My position was done by nominating committee, but it went back. I have long exceeded the term limits with this position. I'm not complaining. I enjoy the work. The only problem is that there has been limited connection and feedback between me and the yearly meeting. I will be in contact with our general secretary on occasion to make sure she is aware as to things that are happening. And I also know that the Council of Churches tends to keep her in the loop, although I've noticed on some of the more recent emails, she hasn't been. So it would be nice to have some sort of regular appointment standard for this.
Yes, Carter. So that's good feedback, and I will make sure that the clerk of our nominating, or maybe Christy can take that on, of making sure that Terry, the clerk of our nominating, I see a thumbs up, receives that feedback, because we want to make sure, one, that the Pennsylvania Council of Churches is listed on the website, and two, that it's got a process that's actually sound in terms of governance support and good term limits and those types of things. And we obviously deeply appreciate your continued service and devotion to representing us on the Pennsylvania Council of Churches, Carter. So thank you for that and for bringing that concern. I wanted to suggest that we spend the remainder of our time reflecting on one query together, which is, TJ, I'm changing up things on the fly. We were going to do two queries, just going to do one, I think, which is what values inform the work of representing PYM? What are the values that inform the work of representing PYM? I just want to create space for us to worship together on that query, and I think that it may help us in terms of, as we move forward, clarify down the line what expectations we want there to be for reps to other organizations. So my thought is that we could spend maybe the next 20 or so minutes worshiping with attention to that query, and friends are invited to share from the silence about that.
I would like to express my gratitude for the work of the nominating committee. I had been for quite a few years the only representative from the early meeting to Friends Peace teams, but at least a couple of years ago, the nominating committee found two excellent new members, Roy Zatkoff and Debbie Wood. So they have been representatives for the last couple of years. such a good work of the nominating committee. Roy was unable to attend tonight. I was expecting Debbie would be with us. I don't know why she is not with us tonight.
I'm trying to translate values into a consideration of what purpose, what service friends contribute as representative to other organizations. Words of transparency and communication rise up for me. Building of a Quaker community does likewise. I think about some of the organizations that are represented here. And representatives often, I believe, contribute to and support and do the work that the other Quaker organizations are engaged in. I would imagine that representatives bring to their organization an understanding, at least on the reps' part, of some of the issues that PYM is involved in, wrestling with, addressing, working on, and as appropriate can share those understandings and information with the organization that they're participating with. One of the concerns that has remained with me relates to how well, as a representative, I'm informed about PYM, its issues, its initiatives, its desires, its mission, its vision. How well am I prepared when I'm appointed as a rep to carry the concerns of PYM as appropriate to the external organization? And likewise, how prepared is PYM to receive back from its representatives information from the external organization? So questions for me that rise up include, what is the process for informing a candidate about the role that they would be serving should they accept the nomination to the external organization? Is that information provided by nominating council? And if so, how do they get it? If not from nominating council, where does that information come from?
I find there is a difference between representing PYM to other Quaker organizations and to representing PYM to non-Quaker organizations. I represent us both with FGC and with the Pennsylvania Council of Churches. With FGC, I can work from a center of people knowing or having a base of knowledge of Quakerism, Quaker thought and practice. When I am at Council of Churches board meetings and other committee meetings, it becomes more of an educational process as to explaining what we believe and what our practices are, which can be rather interesting because of the number of times I've had bishops say, when I retire, I'm becoming a Quaker. And the fact that our way of doing things is different than what other quote unquote Christian churches practice. And so it becomes most interesting in educating other people, and something you must have, I find I have to have patience with.
I just want to reflect back some of the things that I've heard so far. It seems like it is really useful to have a clear sense of what Philadelphia Yearly Meeting is up to, what our vision and mission and strategic directions are, and how that relates to the work specifically that is happening in the organization we represent PYM to. And that finding that relationship can be easier when the other organization in question is Quaker, than when it's not explicitly Quaker, and yet in either case really enriching in terms of how it provides opportunity to root us in reflecting on the faith and the tradition and the variations in our theology and commitments. We also just identified how important it is to have a functioning nominating council, one that is deeply connected to all of the ways in which we need and value our PYM representatives, both to provide them sufficient orientation and to be working with other entities like program committee to ensure that representatives get the care that they need, so that the relationships are maintained throughout the life of the work. For some reason, I was led to share a story, which is that a friend of mine talks about deciding to become a Quaker because she wasn't raised a Quaker, but went to Quaker boarding school. And so one day came home and announced that she was going to be a Quaker now. And her parents said, well, why don't you talk to the pastor first, to our pastor, who happened to live across the street. And so she did that. She went and talked to him. And after the conversation, the pastor met with her parents and said, I think I want to become a Quaker now, after talking to her. Which is, I think, one of the joys of finding a faith tradition that can be so personally as well as communally powerful. And when we have the opportunity to share that joy, we can be so attractive and convincing to others. So I wanted to leave a little bit more time to let people share, in case there was anyone else who had reflections on the query, which is what values inform the work of representing PYM.
I'll share briefly on what I perceive to be some of the values inherent in being a representative to the Friends Committee on National Legislation. As I think everyone is aware, FCNL is our Quaker lobby in Washington, D.C., and concerns itself with national legislative policy. And they really address a very broad spectrum of policies. They're very deeply, profoundly involved in our peace testimony and pursuit of legislation to reduce military spending, to limit and I think preferably eliminate our nuclear arsenal. They are very committed, their legislative policies very committed to racial and gender and economic equality, equity. And the process that FCNL goes through is one that on a periodic basis, I think it's probably every 5 or 6 years, FCNL develops a statement which is entitled, I believe it is titled "This We Believe," and it has sort of 4 major principal areas of legislative work. And then before each 2-year session of Congress, they develop a legislative priorities for the upcoming Congress. So right now we're in the 117th Congress. Many of you in meetings may have participated in that FCNL process. They ask meetings and meeting representatives to develop our, as in my case, Germantown meeting statement of priorities. And I think many of the meetings within PYM participate in that process of saying, what are the things we really care about that we think FCNL should work on in the next Congress, the upcoming Congress. And they have a policy committee which reads all of those statements from the Quaker meetings and Friends churches that participate. Other groups can participate as well. American Friends Service Committee, Friends Schools, Friends Colleges, all can submit statements for what they think FCNL's priorities should be. And the policy committee reads all of those and attempts to distill them down into a set of priorities for the coming legislative session. That is then drafted and proposed to the general committee and is voted on, or not voted on, but is through a somewhat cumbersome but effort at a Quaker process to discern our agreement as a general committee with the statements that the policy committee has drafted. And those discussions can be lively and sometimes can hinge on particular wording that people feel passionate about. But eventually we get to a statement that the general committee can affirm represents our belief in what FCNL should be pursuing in the upcoming legislative session of Congress. it's a two-way street. They're asking for our input, but then the FCNL is also attempts to engage friends throughout the United States, including within PYM, in the process of influencing legislators to follow and pursue the legislative objectives that FCNL has laid out. So we are encouraged to write letters to our congresspeople or senators. We're encouraged to, if there's a particular hot issue where a vote is pending or a key senator is wavering one way or the other, the lobbyists will inform us that that is the case. And in fact, a good recent example of that was the acceptance of the Iran nuclear deal. And Senator Casey turned out to be a key person who was wavering in terms of whether he would support the Iran nuclear deal or not. And his office credits Quakers in Pennsylvania with swaying his opinion toward supporting the Iran nuclear deal. So FCNL relies on us as citizens to exercise influence with our legislators, but in turn, they are very much open to the input from Quaker meetings and Quaker Friends churches around the country in formulating the policies that FCNL will try to pursue. So there's very much a reciprocal sharing of values there. I think just as a footnote, I would say to sustain interest in work on the General Committee, I think it does require someone who has an interest in national politics and someone who cares about policy. So, I think it's probably serving on the committee really is one where it certainly is going to bring forth one's interest in those areas, or it's going to perhaps convince you that that's not your cup of tea so much. In my case, it's an area I'm very interested in, and so I felt like there was a good fit in terms of my personal Quaker values, the values of my meeting, and I think the values that PYM stands for. So it's, I think it is good service, and I would recommend it to people who are considering serving.
If you'd like to hear this from the point of view of the organization and not so much a person named by the yearly meeting to be a representative, I think that one of the values that would be important for someone as a representative of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting to the Friends World Committee is an interest in dialogue, in learning how to be in dialogue and how to stay in the difficult conversations with people who may at first glance not look the same or speak the same. And I think the Philadelphia Yearly Meetings commitment to working on racism and justice issues around being an anti-racist organization are well served by practice at in the programs and events of the Friends World Committee. We have for some years, 10 years, been working more on an environmental or sustainability testimony at a global level. And I think that is something that Philadelphia Yearly Meeting could bring its work, its concerns, its values around environmental issues, and they could learn from the other friends who are working on that issue in other yearly meetings across all the branches of Friends and literally around the world. And the value of worship together in different forms, in different times and places is a value that we hold too strongly as part of the Friends World Committee. And I think that it's one of the ways that representatives of the yearly meeting who participate in Friends World Committee programs and events find that their spiritual life is strengthened by the opportunity to practice articulating their faith to an interested and supportive, but not always understanding audience. Or I don't mean people who don't think the same thing, but wanted to hear more about who you are and why you think that and what you actually believe. And I think that would be both a, I don't always find that among Philadelphia Yearly Meeting friends, but I think it would be a benefit to the yearly meeting for friends to practice.
Thank you for sharing those insights, Will and Robin. There's just a lot of richness available to the wider PYN community and serving as a representative to other organizations. And I think that was really evident in what Bill and Robin shared and is part of, I think, one of the other values that we can work together to highlight as we move forward and share with others about how much of a gift it is, both spiritually and in terms of gaining new skills and expanding ones we already have by serving as a representative to another organization. So I really appreciate those two insights. I wanted to raise the fact that we are in the midst of the runway to annual sessions, and that annual sessions for the second time in history will be taking place entirely virtually. And that this gathering was part of that runway, and that I hope that next year we'll be able to do something similar, but in person and hopefully during the week of annual sessions itself, and that we can maintain greater communication and support for all of the reps between now and then. We do have 3 folks who are part of our leadership: Christy Duncan-Tesper, Jean Marie Prestwich Barch, and Frank Barch on the call. And I wondered if any of you wanted to say anything either about the coming annual sessions or anything else you wanted to share as people who help steward the work of our yearly meeting.
Thank you, Zachary. What I'd love to say is that this year's annual sessions are going to provide us a rich opportunity to look at how we walk our talk and to take some of the basic principles and values, actually, that we've been talking about right here, and look at how we translate them into action in our Philadelphia Yearly Meeting community. So come to sessions.
Thanks, Zachary. What I'd like to say is just, sorry, I'm in a kind of loud, there are teenagers playing cards very close to me. There we go. I want to recognize that a lot of the conversation that we had today was pointing out where we're not so strong in how we maintain our connections with other organizations and support the people who are representing PYM to other places. And I want to say thank you to you for being here. I want to point out that this is the first time that we've done something like this, and my eternal optimistic self to say, so we haven't been great at it, and here is the point where we're starting. Like, we haven't done this before. So we're building from, you know, we've got a way to go, but we've got us together in this room, and we're hearing about what's important to us as we do this work. And so I'm gonna celebrate and that, and thank you for being here to be part of building this right now.
Thanks, Jean Marie and Christy, and thanks to all of you for coming to this meeting. I will be back in touch with some notes and a review of opportunities to stay connected and offer my own commitment to build from here. So thanks so much. Everyone, close with a bit more worship, and then we can be released into the summer night.
I'd like to take this moment to ask you to hold in the light the family of Arlie Johnson. Arlie Johnson Jr. is a representative of Philadelphia Yearly Meeting to the Friends World Committee. But his father, Arlie Johnson Sr., died this week. And their family, his wife, Stacy, they are members of Mickleton Meeting. And anyway, I would just like to hold their family in the light as a tangential part of being the community of friends. Or tangential to this meeting, but deeply part of the family of friends.
Thanks, you all.